So last time we talked about how physical, sort of given circumstances such as age, gender, ability level, things like that, affect the way that a character can be performed physically by a performer. Whether it's how much gravity weighs on your body or how far apart you hold your knees when you're walking or when you're sitting, how graceful you are, if you have a limp or a bad back, things like that. Today we're going to talk a little bit more about how different personality aspects can affect the way a person or a character moves throughout life physically. And the first thing I want to talk about is the idea of what your character leads with. Okay, and by what I mean by lead with is if your character was walking through a door, what part of their body would go through that door first? Okay, and this is a really fun way to really give a lot of personality to your character, and I'll show you why. The first thing that your character could lead with is their head. I'll show you what that looks like. All right, so if I were to walk through a doorway, my head would go through first. Now, people who lead with their heads, characters who lead with their heads, tend to be logical thinkers. They like to think about stuff. They like to think about things before they say or do them. They spend a lot of time wondering about life or making a plan for the future. Okay, head leaders. The second thing a character could lead with is their chest, and I'll show you what that looks like. Now I, as a human being, mostly lead with my chest, so that wasn't hard for me. Okay, but if I were to go through a door, my chest would go through first. Now, characters who are chest leaders, they're more in tune with emotions. Okay, they feel things very deeply. They're sentimental, and maybe if they're a female presenting character, we think of them as being motherly. Or comforting, right? Your heart is in your chest, and so think of everything that has to do with feeling and emotion and love, maybe, and vulnerability coming from this area. Okay, the third area that is that a character could lead with is their pelvis. So we kind of did this with walking like cowboys or swagger the other day, but I'll show you what that looks like. Okay, so we're leading with our pelvis. If we were to walk through a door, our pelvis would be what went through the door first. Now, cowboys aren't the only group that's stereotyped as leading with their pelvis. You can also get like gangsters lean with their pelvis, right? You can get swagger from like pirates lean with their pelvis, right? People who lead with their pelvis are a little bit more physical, okay? They do things maybe without thinking. They have more physical jobs probably or work. They are quick to rush into action, okay? They're the sort of people who would get in a fist fight before they really stopped to consider the emotional or the mental or emotional effects of that fist fight, things like that. And the last thing that your character could lead with is their feet. Now, when I was in college and I was learning the lead with acting strategies, I kept thinking to myself, who leads with their feet? Because I will show you what that looks like. Okay, that is what leading with your feet looks like. And I was like, nobody leads with their feet. Who leads with their feet? let me tell you, I've met some feet leaders. This one gentleman that was a professor at one of the colleges I attended. I'm not sure how he stayed upright while he was walking. I'm really not sure how he didn't just fall over backwards, because he really did. He led with his feet, and they were so far out in front of him. And he had very long legs. So it was a really interesting thing to watch and really fun. And you always knew who it was walking across the campus far away because you could recognize the way he walked. It was great. Now, feet leaders are also people who rush into action, right? They're the first person to do anything. They want to go and do it right now. Let's go. They're the first ones that you're like, who wants to go on a road trip? And they're like, I've packed the car. Okay, those are feet leaders. Again, just like with our pelvis leaders, who are a little bit more physical, you know, they also, just like the pelvis leaders, don't really take time to consider with their minds or with their hearts what the next step is. They just do it. But unlike the pelvis leaders, they're not quite as physical about it. They want to move locations. They want to get to the next thing, but they're probably not willing to do a fist fight to get there. So those are the different parts of your body that your character could lead with. What I would like you to do now is to take a couple of minutes and practice doing your circles, okay, either right next to your desk if you are in class, or in the back of the room if the teacher whose classroom you are currently in is allowing you to use the back of the room. You can do that. If you're at home, please take advantage of all the space that you can in walking. First, lead with your head, do a couple of laps. Lead with your chest, do a couple of laps. Lead with your pelvis, do a couple laps. Lead with your feet, do a couple of laps. All right, so the next thing I want to talk about is intensity. Intensity is this really wonderful thing, how quick, how heavy, how sharp, how loud, how hard something is. It makes it more intense. Now your character might have a lot of intensity. Maybe they're loud and their arm movements are big and they take up a lot of room when they walk. Okay, and they're very intense. They're very intense, right? When they talk to people, they talk right at them, right? They use big emotions. They're a big character all the way around. They're very intense. Maybe your character is not intense whatsoever. Maybe they're very meek, and if they do hand motions, they're all right here. They're all right here. When they walk, it's with smaller steps, and they don't take up as much space. They're not as loud, maybe, and maybe when they talk to people, they don't really face them. They talk to the side. These are all less intense character choices. And you can see how both of those are really interesting. They're just very, very different. And you don't have to do one extreme or the other extreme. You can have characters that fall anywhere sort of in the middle that you want them to. But the emotional state of your character, their personality traits, that's all going to influence how intense your character is. So what I would like you to do is first walk around doing very intense hand gestures and walking hard, really like stomp your feet into the ground when you walk, and take big steps. And when you go to go sit in your chair, you go right to your chair and you sit down in it, right? And then I want you to do the exact same thing as an incredibly non-intense character. It's a very meek character. So don't make big hand motions. You can make small ones. When you walk, Be very, very small about it. And when you go sit in your chair, go ahead and do a little slide to your chair. Okay, very quiet, very meek. And then what I would like you to do is do the exact same thing over again, but with sort of an in between those two things. It's not really intense, and it's not very not intense. It's right in the middle. Please pause this video while you do that. All right, so the last thing that we're going to talk about today is rhythm. I, as a human being, I have a pretty fast rhythm. I talk fast, I walk fast, everything I do is pretty fast. Now, it's not as fast as some people's, but it's pretty fast. In fact, when I'm teaching, I have to tell myself, all right, Miss Browning, you have to go slower, otherwise students are not going to be able to understand, right? But when I'm just in conversation, I tend to talk very, very fast. Now, other people, they walk a little slower, they talk a little slower. These are the people who it takes them a very long time in the mornings to get dressed, right? Changing the rhythm of your character can do amazing things in establishing your character's personality. So go ahead and take a few moments to do your circles, and I want you to do it pretty fast. And I want you to have a fake conversation with someone in your head. Please don't say your words out loud because we don't want to disturb the other students who are also working. But go ahead and have sort of a fake conversation with yourself, talking very quickly and moving very quickly. I don't care what you say to yourself because it's going to be under your breath. So for example, I'll show you what that would look like for me. All right, so that's what that looks like for me. Please go ahead and talk very quickly and walk very quickly. Pause this video while you do it. All right, so you're back. I want you to do that same thing where you're talking and walking, but I want you to do it very slowly. Everything should be very slow. The words that you say to yourself quietly should be very slow. All movement should be very slow. Please go ahead and take a moment to do this. Pause this video while you do. All right, so we've gone fast, we've gone slow, but there's more to rhythm than just fast or slow. There's rhythm that isn't regular, right? So you can have a fast regular rhythm. You can have a slow regular rhythm. But you can also have an irregular rhythm. Right? That's irregular. Now, people with irregular rhythms, they tend to seem a little chaotic and make people a little uncomfortable. Now, if that's what your character needs, then by all means, do it, and it can be really fun. So if you're talking and you're talking like this, but you know, you tend to slow down sometimes, especially if it's on something that you really are thinking about, but then you go really fast again. And then who knows, maybe you like just stop. Oh, and then you come back, right? It's a different rhythm. And maybe it looks like that while you're walking. So you can see it looks chaotic, it looks jumbled. It might be a little like, what's going on with that person? But it can be really fun. So please take a moment to walk and talk to yourself in an irregular rhythm. Again, try not to disturb other people around you, and when you're talking to yourself, do it silently. Please pause this video while you do. All right, so we've gone over a little bit of physicality. We've gone over the demographics of your character, things that you can't change, how old they are, what their perceived gender is, what class they were born into, what sort of abilities they have or disabilities. And now we've gotten to some of the more fun, quirky, character-driven stuff, personality stuff, right? You can also change your character depending on their happiness or their sadness level. People who are happy tend to be a little lighter on their feet, okay? They tend to have a little bit better posture. They tend to hold themselves a little more open than people who are not happy, right? People who are unhappy a lot of the time, a little slower, right? They tend to be a little more closed off, right? You can close yourself off by moving your shoulders forward or crossing your arms. Crossing your arms is a very closed off gesture. It makes people think that you're not willing to talk to them or that you're not friendly, right? People who are happy have high intensity, who are really happy, tend to have high intensity, but not so much directness, right? So lots of intensity, lots of fun, but maybe they don't like talk right at you, right? It's fun and it's great and they're laid back and it's cool. You know, people who are angry, right? If you have people who are angry most of the time, then maybe they have a little bit lower intensity, but they're very direct. They'll just talk at you. And maybe they don't bounce around, but they're not adverse, getting right up in your business and letting you know it, right? So have fun. Have fun playing with what part of their body they lead with. Have fun playing with what intensity they have and what sort of directness they have. And then have fun playing with their rhythm. This should all be a game. And I mean, it's work too, but it's also a game. And you should enjoy doing it. This is the fun part of performance. Please take the rest of class to practice putting all these different things from the past 2 days together. So maybe you have an old man, okay? Old man who's happy all the time, and maybe grew up, you know, in a lower class shoveling coal, right? So if he's an old man, he's gonna be, you know, whatever version of old, you know, maybe he's the old man sort of like this that scratches his belly, but maybe he's the old man like my grandma's, the old woman, right? And he's been shoveling coal his whole life. Poor guy has probably got so many back issues. So maybe he leans over and puts his hand on his hip or on his thigh like this sometimes, right? He hobbles around, but he's happy. Hey, it is good to see you, right? Or maybe it's a teenager who's really angsty, right? Really angry and sarcastic and rude, right? And teenager, female, sarcastic, rude, but feels a lot, so she leads with her chest, right? So I guess we're doing this again today, right? So have fun. Combine all these things into a few different characters, play around with it, have a good time. If you have any questions, let me know.